Just waiting for the button to become available. Okay. Good afternoon, parents. We're glad and excited that you're here. Thank you for your time and for the level of interest that you've consistently shown to our 4 meetings. This is our 4th meeting. Every topic that we have brought to you is relevant at this very moment when we are living through this contingency. So with that, I would like to then begin to share my screen with you. We have a presentation that will guide the conversation today. Give me 1 second. Let me see. It has to be here. Here we go. Okay, so this is our presentation for today. As I was indicating, it will guide the conversation that we'll have. With that, I would like to open the microphone for Ms. Orloff. Can you unmute yourself, Ms. Orloff, or do I have to unmute you?
No, here I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, so take Orloff on the screen. We see today's items. I've already mentioned them to you, and so it's now Ms. Orloff's turn on behalf of Mr. Miranda.
Yes. Okay. My name is Katie Orloff. I'm the communications director for the district. I work for our superintendent, Dr. Frank Miranda, and he asked me to extend to everyone here today his thanks for being a part of these meetings and for being a partner with us and trying to do the best we can for our students during these times. As a district, we are continuing to focus on several main priorities, and those are distance learning, providing grab-and-go meals for students, and also maintaining the security of our campuses. He especially wanted me to say that we are so lucky to have a really amazing group of dedicated employees doing good work in all of these areas and everything they do. We have a lot of heroes out there in Colton Joint Unified, which definitely includes all of you parents. He appreciates you all so much. We're also talking a lot about the class of 2020. They are continually in our hearts, and we're working on ways we can safely recognize their achievements. This is a really stressful time, and we all still have a lot of questions about how this situation will continue to unfold. But by keeping safety and learning as our main focus areas, we can continue to move forward together. So next slide, please. And in order to move forward together, it is so important that we all stay connected with each other. That is a little bit challenging now that so many of us are at home all the time. But there's a number of great ways you can do that and sources of information from the district and our schools. And we encourage you to take advantage of all of them. The first is the district and school websites. We try to put as much information as you will need as we can on there. Everything from distance learning to mental health, enrollment, the class of 2020, meal service, what to do if your district Chromebook isn't working, whatever your question is. The district and school websites are a really outstanding place to start to look for that information. You can also please follow us on social media. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, we have the same handle on all 3 of those. It's at Colton JUSD. And you should also follow Superintendent Miranda. He's on Twitter and Instagram. And that way you can see his personal messages and hear from him directly. There's also the parent messages we send out, and we have been sending out a lot of those. I know it's really important to stay tuned in with those, the voice messages and emails and text alerts through what we call QC. It's a new system we've been transitioning to this year, and you can access your settings for that through the parent portal. And the other way to stay connected, of course, is our district email. It's a great way if you know the particular person you need to communicate with, if you have a question for your student's teacher or principal. As you may know, the way you type out somebody's email address, it's their first name underscore last name at CJUSD.net. But also, if you go back to the district and school websites, there's directories on there to help you find those if you aren't sure what it is. So it's really it's always true, but it's never been more true than now, that we all need to stay in contact with each other and connected. So please keep listening to those messages and looking on the websites for important information, and follow us on social media so that we can share as much information with you as we can. So here's here's a visual to show you how to find our board meetings online. Our Board of Education continues to hold its regular public meetings. There are also WebEx meetings, just like this one. So those are posted if you go to the district website, www.cjusd.net, look under the leadership tab in the main menu, go down to Board of Education, and that'll take you to the page where you can find the agenda. Our next meeting is on Thursday of next week, May 7th. So the agenda will be posted there on Monday evening, May 4th, and it'll have instructions there on the web page and on the agenda for how you can access that WebEx meeting. Or if you want to make a public comment, you can do that as well by emailing our board's executive assistant, Joanne Medina, and that information will be there as well. So you can continue to participate with our board just like you always have been. So that's everything I wanted to share with you today. And again, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Orloff. It's always great to have and to benefit from the information you provide to us. And let us then continue with our meeting. We will transition into something that's so real to all of us these days, and that is social distancing. The need to maintain prudent distance between us and others is having a different impact on people, depending on what day it is. It can be from day to another, or from one moment in the daytime to another. Some of us have experienced very positive, optimistic days. Other times of the day, we can feel the urge to socialize and to see loved ones and to hug them. And so, for that reason, we extended an invitation to Mr. Antonio Castro. He is our behavioral and mental health manager at the school district. And both him and Ms. Maldonado, who is our clinical therapist and supervisor, work together to serve our students and our families. And he's here with us this afternoon to share a presentation on how we can support ourselves and our children during the COVID-19 crisis. And Mr. Castro, are you available? Can you please open your microphone?
Yes, can you hear me, Alejandra?
Yes, I can hear you, Antonio. Welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad it's working.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for having me, Alejandra. And you know, it's an honor to always to talk to parents, to do this work that we love to do, which is to connect with our parents, to connect with our community. It's our passion. It's what we are here to do as a program, as a support for our parents, for our kids. So again, thank you so much for having me and giving me this time to talk to our parents.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're very welcome, Alejandra. The presentation is two-part. You know, this is a two-part presentation. The first part of the presentation is really about supporting ourselves as adults. you know, when I was putting this presentation together, I didn't want to make the mistake of just talking to parents. I didn't want to talk to you and at you about your kids. And what I mean by that is that I didn't want to overlook how important it is during these stressful and difficult times. I didn't want to overlook and certainly not mistake the fact that we can't really be helpful to our kids until we first take care of ourselves. We have heard that so much in the past months, in the past years. Many of us have been hearing it all our lives. But, you know, we don't always take the intentional steps to take care of ourselves. And so the very first part of this presentation is dedicated to you parents. And we know and we understand, we as mental health professionals in my program, we know parents that you are the bedrock for your children. You are you are their foundation. And if you are not okay, if the child's foundation is not solid, they don't have much to stand on. So we wanted to dedicate the first half of the presentation to you parents. For that reason, the second half of the presentation is dedicated to your kids. You know, it's giving you some basic pointers, some basic ideas, and some strategies to support your children during these difficult times. So let's begin with you. Let's begin with you, parents. So there's the analogy, you know, that we often hear about putting on the oxygen mask. And, you know, for many of us, I didn't always pay attention to this, by the way. It just really started dawning on me maybe a couple years back when I really started to pay attention to the safety procedures, you know, that flight attendants take to let us know about how important it is to put the oxygen mask. But what really stuck with me a couple of years back when it finally, the light bulb went off, you know, is this analogy that in a time of crisis, in a time of need, you know, and certainly in a situation where you're in an airplane, right? And there's some kind of an emergency, you have to take care of yourself first. You have to put on the oxygen yourself first, parents, before you can be a service or a help to your child. So that symbolism is really about taking care of yourself. And, you know, there's the old saying, right, that you cannot give what you don't have, parents. So again, let us begin with that first message of taking care of yourself. So let's first talk about the issue, right? Let's talk about the psychological, the emotional issue that we're all dealt with regards to this COVID situation, with regards to the quarantine that we're having to take part in. And it's you know, it's complicated. You know, there's so much that is happening in our community right now. There's so much news reports. There are so many different news reports, I should say. There are so many different media outlets and news outlets that are feeding us a lot of information. And I would say a lot of it is incredibly helpful. A lot of it is keeping us informed of what's going on and helping us to make good decisions to keep our kids safe. But at the same time, you know, just the gravity and how big the situation is causing a lot of anxiety. It's causing a lot of stress. And that leads to a whole bunch of other issues. But I want to just begin, though, by, first of all, again, highlighting the impact that media has played on our mental health as adults, as parents, and also on the mental health of our children. So it's media, it's news reports. And like I said, there's so much good to the media, there's so much good to news. At the same time, I feel like we are overwhelmed, right? We are overwhelmed with information. And sometimes that information can lead to some stress. It can lead to a lot of worry. At the root of what's happening, parents, right now, in terms of our mental state, one of the big problems is the unknown. The unknown of the situation that we're dealing with, the unknown of this virus, the unknown of who it's going to affect, the unknown of how it's going to affect us, you know, the unknown of whether or not it's going to affect us in our homes. A big stressor right now is that it just seems like every day, you know, the virus gets closer and closer to home. And what I mean that it is not necessarily, and God willing, none of our families that I'm speaking to right now are impacted by this. But if they have, you know, we notice that if it's not somebody we know directly, it's getting to the point where we know family members or we know of friends that may have been impacted by this. So it's very close to home, right? And the unknown is creating a lot of anxiety. At the root of anxiety, and that, again, that is one of the major issues of people's mental health right now is anxiety. And at the root of that anxiety is the unknown. Now, anxiety has everything to do with not being in control, right? The psychology of anxiety is about a situation or situations in our lives whereby we feel like we're not in control. That feeling that we're not in control creates a lot of stress, right? Creates a lot of angst in us, and it leads to a lot of negative thinking. And those thoughts now then lead to other thoughts about how to control the unknown, which is a huge anxiety provoking situation because there's a lot that we don't know, right? There's so much that we don't know with the situation. So much of what's going on is because we don't know or we fear the unknown, right? And the anxiety that comes from it is also trying to control the unknown. Now, there's also another side effect, which is depression. And I just want to break that down a little bit for parents. So depression has a lot to do with grief. Now, I'm not talking about physical loss necessarily, although certainly with actual losses, there's always going to be grief. But at the root of depression, there is unresolved grief. And what I mean by that is the inability to process issues that we are dealing with in our lives, the inability to process, symbolic losses and sometimes literal losses. And so that is also at the root of kids' mental health right now, and for parents, right? There's also a lot of grief that parents are having to deal with because, and again, it may not just be physical loss that they're dealing with, but just a lot of symbolic loss. So let's take a look at some of the common psychological symptoms that are specifically related to quarantine. If we can back up just one slide real quick, I want to just highlight a couple of more symptoms. So one more forward. Perfect, thank you. There is this concept of cabin fever, and I never thought that I would find myself using this example because this word is typically used with people that live up in the mountains, that live isolated during the winter time, people that live in Alaska, people that live in really cold climates. And so cabin fever is this phenomenon where, you are locked up, for months because of the severe weather conditions. And you start to develop these symptoms, right? You start to kind of feel like, you just start to feel confined. You start to feel sometimes even physically sick just because of the isolation. You start to develop some anxiety, some loneliness. And so cabin fever is definitely something that's no longer applying to just people that live in the, in Alaska or in cold situations. This is definitely one of the big consequences of this quarantine is people being stuck in their homes and again, and feeling isolated, feeling, just feeling the aftermath of having to be isolated in quarantine for so many days. Your mood is very much affected. Is another psychological impact of quarantine is your mood and stress levels. See, your mood is very much impacted by certain chemicals in your body. And when you are quarantined inside of a house, those chemicals that used to be produced by being active, by going out into the sunlight, by the way, by being physically active and walking to, for myself, for example, at my site at Student Services, every day, I make it a point to walk in and out of my office, and I try to stay really active. And those movements and that daily schedule allows me to cope, right? But in the absence of that movement, in the absence of that activity, there are certain chemicals that my body is no longer producing. So one of the other consequences is low mood. And the same thing goes for stress, right? Irritability is very, very common, parents. And this kind of goes to cabin fever. This kind of goes to being stuck in somebody's home and in your own home, I'm sorry, and not having the freedom to just be out and about. It's very normal and it's very typical, parents, to just feel kind of irritable, to feel kind of moody, to be in this kind of funky mood throughout the day. And again, it has so much to do with just being stuck in your home or isolated. Now, I don't want to use the word stuck. I actually want to take that back because I feel like that is such a necessary thing to do. But I think sometimes we feel stuck, right? Because we don't have the option or the freedom to just be out and about like we used to be. Insomnia is another big one. And for many reasons, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later with regards to talking about our youth and our teenagers and our kids. Screen time has a big impact on and leads to insomnia. But bottom line is that many of us are just not getting enough sleep. And a lot of this could be because we're thinking about issues, because we're fretting on problems, or we're fretting on the fear of the unknown, right? Is that anxiety that has got us to a point where we're not resting, right? Our bodies are kind of out of whack right now. They're not in their normal rhythm, and neither is our sleep. So it could lead to insomnia. Anger and irritability are very much connected. Emotional and or screen exhaustion is very typical right now, parents. You know, most of us that work in education are pretty much working and living off our screens right now. And many parents who are on their screen as well, maybe because of work or maybe because of their kids' schools or whatever the situation is. But screen exhaustion is real. And I keep hearing about it. It seems like every day that goes by, I hear more and more from parents, from children, just from adults in general, that they're starting to feel a little bit exhausted about being on the screen all the time. And we'll talk a little bit about what to do with that in a few minutes. And then last but not least, depression. Like I said, I've already broken that down along with anxiety, but that is a very normal feeling that people are struggling right now because of the quarantine. If we can skip to the next one, please. It's very important to understand, parents, that that feelings are not just feelings, but they're very much connected, right? Our emotions are connected to certain chemicals in our brain. Those neurotransmitters that that create certain emotions manifest in the body, and the way we think affects the way we feel, and the way we feel affects our behavior. So it's all very much connected. And I want you guys to understand that it's all connected. It's not separate mechanisms. They're all one of the same, right? So our thoughts affect our mood affects our behavior. So these are some of the behavioral things that you want to watch out for yourself and your kids. Mood swings, which are very typical during these stressful times. Problems with attention and concentration. Physical complaints. A lot of anxiety, a lot of stress is manifested in the body, parents. There is a certain chemical that we release when we feel stress. It's called cortisol. And it's a good chemical at a very small level, and in a very small dose. It's helpful because it allows you to think quickly, act quickly. But when we experience ongoing stress and we are constantly releasing this chemical in our body, we start to feel things in our body. We start to feel like aches and pains and experiencing stomach aches and headaches. And the bottom line is that ultimately your emotions start to affect the way that you feel, not just emotionally, but physically. And then last but not least, just feeling overwhelmed. You may find yourself all of a sudden feeling tearful. It's if I can be very transparent, this has happened to me and my family. My poor mom, just I think that the media and the news, got to her a few weeks ago, and maybe like a week and a half ago, actually. She was just very concerned, very, very fearful about everything going on. And she just became very emotional. So I had to sit there and listen to my mom and just try to listen to her, hear her out. But that's very normal for us to become a little bit overwhelmed during this quarantine. Feeling unmotivated, I'll get into the biology of that in just a little bit. And then again, feeling reactive and irritable. These are all behavioral things that are very typical and typical behavioral reactions to stress. Next slide, please. So we understand that there's a problem, right, parents? We understand that, the issue is real. The problems are real. The anxiety is very real. And it's very normal, by the way, parents, to be feeling some of the ways that, if any of you connected with some of the symptoms that I listed, it's perfectly normal. And that was the point of sharing the previous two slides, right? Is I just want to normalize, parents, the situation that we're all dealing with. This isn't just, for you as parents, this goes for everybody, for any person, any individual human being in whatever capacity, including myself as a mental health professional. I have often experienced some of those symptoms in the last few weeks. So that's just to let you know that we're all human and we all go through those difficulties, through those physical and emotional reactions. But what do we do with that, right? How do we help ourselves? There's several things that we can do. We have to, in the midst of all of the media coverage on this pandemic, it's very easy to become triggered. It's very easy to become stressed out. And that puts us at a disadvantage when we are having to now parent our children, right? So it's so important that we remain calm and that you find some reassurance, right? That this too shall pass, right? That this situation is temporary, parents. Let's not forget that. Let's focus on the fact that this is temporary, that this is going to pass. So you have to find ways to reassure yourself. Because if you don't, right, it really puts us at a disadvantage when we are dealing with conflict with our kids. Parents, I advise you to be very open and honest. I think that as parents, many of us parents can relate to this idea or this need to sometimes put on the face for our kids. You know, many of us put on the cape and, we put on the mask every day to try to be strong, to try to be, just be resilient for our kids. But we can only be resilient and put on that face for so long, parents. And it's okay for you to be open and honest to someone. And I would highly advise that you find somebody in your life to be completely open and honest. I don't have a lot of people in my life that I need to open up to. I have one or two that I'm relying on during this difficult time, but it's so necessary that we have at least that one person to be open and vulnerable with, because it really helps with your emotions. It helps to control your emotions so that you don't lose control, right, with your kids. Manage your own screen time, parents. Manage your own screen time on TV. Limit your own consumption of news. I've heard a lot of good tips about this, about just having a routine where you get your information at some time during the day, whether it's early morning or in the afternoon. But I wouldn't advise that we sit in front of the television all day long. I'll be honest with you, parents. I was guilty of this in the very beginning. In the first few days of this pandemic, I couldn't get off the television screen. And, again, it has to do with the unknown. It has to do with my brain struggling with this anxiety of the unknown and trying to get answers. And I get it. I was there and I did this for several days at the very beginning of this pandemic. But I have learned to manage my screen time. And I would advise for you to do the same. It is going to help you so much, parents, to not just fret on all the negative news that sometimes we tend to find on the news outlets. So limit your consumption of news, very important. Manage your anxiety, parents. Remember, anxiety is about feeling like you don't have control. It's fear of the unknown, right? There was something that's happening in your life where you feel like you're not in control. And psychologically, the reason you continue to experience anxiety is because you keep trying to find control even where you cannot. It's not possible, right? You can't control this pandemic. We cannot control whether or not they're going to come out with the vaccine in the next several months. Who knows? So I would advise that you channel your energy, instead of trying to control the anxiety of the unknowns about this pandemic, to control what you have control over, which is your awareness and your body. Right? Become more mindful of your triggers. Be aware of how your body is feeling and doing, because then you're going to need to, then that'll allow you to take a step back when you need to. So consider doing self-soothing as much as possible. There are many basic things that you can do to self-soothe, whether it's taking a short walk, listening to music. I'll get into some specifics in just a little bit, but it's very important that we do some self-soothing as much as possible. Hey, and you know what? Every now and then, it's okay to eat a little ice cream or to just do a little something good for yourself. Won't do a lot for a diet, but we have to be good to ourselves. We have to be forgiving, because we need it, parents. We need to be able to take those short little breaks right now. We just don't want to become dependent on it. But every now and then, there's nothing wrong with it. The understanding of your child's frustrations over not seeing friends. Parents, moms, and dads, this is such a key. And I'm going to get into this more when I get to the child section. But this is big. Many of us are underestimating the true loss that this is creating in our kids. And it's funny for me to say it that way, and it's probably funny for you parents to hear it this way, but it is a loss. And there are multiple losses, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But what I'm really trying to say here, parents, is just have some perspective. And the perspective that I'm offering is to put yourself in the shoes of a kid, of a young child, of a teenager, who is all of a sudden in a situation where they don't get to live their lives as normal. They don't get to finish out their year and socialize with their friends like they were planning to. They don't get to engage in end of year activities, prom, and and all these different activities and all these sporting events and whatnot. There's so much that kids don't get to do, and all of that represents a loss. During this time, especially for the teenagers, the teenage years, for a teenager, this stage is so critical when it comes to socializing, right? The need to connect, the need to be accepted and to be acknowledged by other peers. That social connection is incredibly important for a teenager. And for that to be completely be taken away from them, it is an absolute loss. So I'm just offering you perspective, parents. Please have that perspective. It'll give you a little more patience when our kids all of a sudden start to be frustrated with us or are giving us some kind of an attitude. A lot of their feelings have a lot to do with grief and loss. Practice self-care, like I've already said, taking breaks, breathing, meditation, pampering yourself, whatever works for you. My biggest advice when it comes to self-care, parents, is to be physically active. It's not for the exercise component, although it doesn't hurt. Parents, when you are active, when you are physically active, you again are releasing certain chemicals in your brain that help you to feel better. And those chemicals that you release in your brain that help you to feel better will help you to better deal with stress. It will allow you to deal with conflict with your kids much easier, much better, much more effectively and efficiently. So I really want to recommend parents to get some physical exercise, take a walk, get some sun. Science has proven that when we are feeling depressed, we tend to self-isolate, but actually the rays of the sun actually triggers, again, a certain chemical in our body that helps to improve our mood. So just the fact of standing by the window and getting some sun in the morning, or make it a routine to stand in front of your porch if you have one, or get some sun, get some fresh air, get some physical exercise, and it's going to jumpstart your mood. Not going to fix it, but it's going to give you a jump start that many of us need in the morning, in the middle of the day, or in the afternoon. And then last but not least, parents, on this slide, nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. And parents, I am a proving testament. I'm a mental health professional, and I have to be humble in telling you that I haven't been, I've had my good days and bad days in the last 3-4 weeks. And that's perfectly okay. There have been times when I've had to use the iPad as my babysitter for at least an hour because I have a meeting to attend to. It's okay, parents. You have to be good to yourself. You have to, and I mean this with all due respect, but we have to lower our self-expectations during this time, meaning that we all want to strive to be the best parents that we can, but we have to acknowledge that we can't be perfect right now. And you know what? If you want to use that iPad for a small amount of time to just kind of give your kids something to do and give you a break, it's okay. It's okay. Everything in moderation is okay. It's when we go to extremes. And I'll talk about that in just a second of what that could look like for our kids. If we can go to the next slide. So being prepared is important, right? So the last slide was really about preventing conflict. This next slide is really about minimizing conflict, right? Now, we're going to have conflict, parents. It's not a perfect situation. When you're in a room with the same people every single day for more hours than we've probably ever been with people in our homes, there's going to be conflict. So let me give you permission to not be perfect. Let me let you know, parents, that it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And this information that I'm giving you is really about preparing you to better manage that conflict when it does arise. So to minimize conflict, again, understand what triggers you, right? For me and my wife, we've learned that it's just a lot of noise can really trigger us. So we have to find ways to help each other with our two little ones. We have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and my goodness, they love to scream, they love to make noise. But what I've learned about myself and my wife is in herself, and I know that she would attest to this, is that I think we just have really sensitive ears. So for us, loud noises can be a big trigger. So we have to plan for that. And we've kind of learned to help each other out as much as possible so that right now she's got them on a car ride. And I appreciate that so that I can do this presentation. We help each other out. But for me, a big trigger is just loud noises and screaming and yelling. That's what it is for me. And I'm sure it's for a lot of parents. So be aware of your triggers. You have to pause as much as possible, parents. When you start to feel triggered, when you start to feel agitated, when your kids, certain way of being is starting to affect you, to get to you, you have to learn to give yourself a pause. Give your brain some time to let your body know that it's okay. When you pause, when you step away, when you go outside, when you go hang out with your pets, if you have any dogs, I have a couple of dogs myself. That's what I do, by the way, to give myself a pause. I'll go out there, spend a few minutes with my dogs, and I come back. And if I don't do that, then sometimes my anxiety or my stress will just continue to escalate. So please give yourself pauses as much as possible. Plan ahead. And by the way, parents, if you lose it, forgive yourself. It's okay. Apologize and start over. We have to be good to ourselves. Nobody is perfect. And we can't beat ourselves up for making mistakes, right? We have to be responsible. We always strive to be better people and make better decisions with our kids. But you know what, parents, during this time especially, we have to be good to ourselves and understand that if you make a mistake, if you lose your temper here and there, apologize to yourself, apologize to your child, and move on and start over. And kids are so forgiving. A good formula to diffuse tension. So if you start to experience tension with your children, you have to, first and foremost, like I already said, anticipate, right? You have to anticipate what may stress you out and think about how you might react. Acknowledge and identify how you're feeling in the moment, right? Many of us don't take the time to do this. We have a feeling and then we just react to the feeling. So this process of anticipating and identifying your feelings is very intentional. And just the act of going through this 3-stage process actually really helps you to cope with stress when it comes to your kids. Manage your thoughts and feelings and ask for help. And in order to self-regulate, if you're not able to do this on your own, ask for help, parents. Ask for help. And sometimes it's just talking to a friend or talking to a neighbor. But if you're finding yourself like you're just losing control, talk to a professional. I am a resource. We and myself and Ms. Leslie Maldonado are a resource to you, parents. And if you need something, please reach out to us. There is a ton of help out there. There's a lot of support for kids and for parents. And if you need that information, I will absolutely get it to you. I want to make one more comment about this slide before I move on. At the very bottom of this slide, on the left-hand side, you see this picture of this brain. And there are 3 very important parts to this brain that affect the way we feel, that affect our mood, right, and our psychological state. At the very bottom, you see there, it says their survival state. This is the brainstem, right? The brainstem is the most essential, but the most primitive part of our brain. It is the most basic part of our brain that controls fight, flight, or freeze. So when in a state of stress, of high stress, you activate this part of the brain, fight, flight, or freeze. This is also the part of the brain that releases that chemical cortisol that I was talking about earlier. And I was saying how in small quantities, it can be good for you. But when we experience too much stress and anxiety and in high levels of cortisol, it can lead to a lot of problems, parents. It can lead to a lot of overreactions. It can also literally break down our body. So it can be very toxic for us. So it's very, very important to be able to regulate that fight, flight, or freeze response. The other part of the brain that has everything to do with our feelings and emotions is our limbic system. Our limbic system regulates our mood, right? It helps us to identify and to process feelings. Now, for young kids, parents, this part of the brain doesn't really come into maturity until 14, 15, 16 years of age. But what we're noticing is that there is a big gap between chronological age and kids' limbic system of development, meaning a kid can be chronologically 14, 15 years old, But sometimes their limbic system, right, their emotional IQ or their ability to identify and express emotions, sometimes that developmental stage is very far behind. So they may be chronologically 15, but for many of our kids, they are 2, 3, sometimes even 4 or 5 years behind emotionally. So the way that we nurture that is by processing emotions, right? By checking in with our kids, asking them basic questions about their thoughts and their feelings. And you know what, parents? It's okay to be real with our kids. Sometimes culturally, we really hold ourselves back from reading in front of our kids because we are afraid that our kids are not going to want to do with that emotion. Now, granted that we should be responsible when we share emotions with our kids where they don't feel guilty, but it is important to be open and honest to our kids about how we feel because that's how they learn emotion, right? If you give them permission to feel a certain way, it's going to give them the freedom to express that same emotion that they're probably feeling and express that to you or to someone else. And then last but not least, there is the executive, the frontal cortex or the prefrontal cortex. That is where all of decision making and thinking takes place. But here's the thing. That's the part of the brain that whenever there's conflict, it would be perfect. It would be such an ideal thing, to work out of the prefrontal cortex when there's conflict. However, more times than not, humans do not function from that prefrontal cortex where decision and reasoning and logic is stored. Whenever we experience high levels of stress and we don't learn to manage it and stop it, most of us, or the majority of us, will immediately go to the brainstem. And remember, the brainstem is where fight, flight, or freeze lives. So it does you no good, parents, to be in a state of survival and your child to be in a state of survival. If both you and your child are in a state of survival during conflict, it is an absolute recipe for just intense conflict. So you have to be the adult, you have to be the bigger person and learn to minimize that fight, flight, or freeze response for yourself. You have to learn how to mitigate it, how to minimize it, so that you can access the other parts of the brain, but not only yourself, but to help your child access that part of the brain, right? So there's also things that they need to do in order to learn how to regulate that part of the brain, and I'll talk about that in a second. If we can move on to the next slide. So if all else fails, right, if we've tried to do some prevention, if we've tried to do some early intervention, which is what the last slide was about, and that has failed, the first thing that we have to do is we have to attend to the thoughts and the feelings that we're dealing with, right? Separate yourself, back away from the situation, and you have to acknowledge how you're feeling. You cannot begin to take the next step. You can't change behavior until you address the emotion or the feeling or the thought behind it. So attend to your thoughts, attend to your feelings, validate them, accept them. If you're upset, if you're frustrated, if you're disappointed, whatever it is that you're feeling, you have to acknowledge it and you have to find a way to express it. The next thing to do, parents, is to distract yourself from the intensity of that conflict. Take a break, walk away from the situation. The worst thing to do is to stay in that same environment with your child once you've experienced conflict. It's only going to make it worse. It does wonders to take a step back. It does wonders to step away and leave the situation, take a break, take a walk, leave the situation. It's going to help your body to self-regulate. It's going to take your brain away from that fight, flight, or freeze response, and it will allow you to access that thinking part of your brain that needs to be whenever we experience conflict. Last but not least, nurture and nourish the brain and the body. You've got to get sleep, parents. I'll get into sleep in just a little bit, but you have to drink a lot of water. Water is absolutely helpful for helping you stay hydrated. But again, sleep, water, and exercise are very, very much connected to emotions and psychology. Eating healthy meals, exercising, like I already said. Avoid information that increases your stress level. So again, that goes back to the news, and just limiting your screen time. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, parents. So I've talked briefly about, and I can't stress this enough. If you don't take care of yourself, then you don't have much to offer your kids, parents. So I really hope, and in my opinion, the most important part of the presentation just took place. Because if you're able to take care of yourself, then you can be a support, you can be a positive influence on your child. So assuming that we are taking care of yourselves, and I hope that you're all going to make a commitment to do better for yourself, to not be so hard on yourself. And I hope that you're all going to strive to not be perfect, but just to be better during this time. Then now we can focus on this next half, which is really all about your kids. In order to help our children cope during these difficult times, routines are incredibly important, but let me take you back to the psychology of anxiety. Anxiety is about feeling like you're not in control. Anxiety is about situations where we feel like we don't have control, like we feel that make us feel like we cannot predict, right? Where we don't have an answer to. It's the unknown. Routines are a perfect counterbalance to anxiety. During this situation of quarantine, there's a lot of anxiety, right? Like I said, there's anxiety stemming from media, from the news, from all these different outlets. So kids are walking around with a lot of anxiety. The way that we can counter that is by instilling routines. Try to keep the routines that you had going for school, meaning as much as possible, try to keep the routine for getting up in the morning, right? Getting ready, having breakfast, if that was part of their daily routine. Setting a certain amount of time for schoolwork, right? And trying to stick to that as much as possible. Moving from that, whatever other routines you have in place, including dinner time, by the way, routines are incredibly important. The more that you can structure the day for your kids, the better they are going to be able to deal with the unknown, right? So structure creates routine. That routine gives them a sense of like, okay, I know what's happening in my environment. I may not be able to control what's going on outside, but the fact that I know what's going to happen, today helps to counter that sense of anxiety that they're feeling because of this quarantine situation. Meals, schoolwork, like I said, but sleep. Now let me speak to sleep just a little bit. This is a big one, parents, and this is good information for you and your kids. It's great information for adults, is what I meant to say, just as it is for your kids and your teenagers. Sleep is incredibly important in order to be resilient and in order to cope with the stressors of this quarantine that we're dealing with. There is a study that was done, and actually this is unrelated to quarantine, but I'm going to bring it back. There's some research out there. There's a journal of adolescent health that I'm quoting here, that I was researching prior to this presentation, that was mentioning the ideal sleep time, right, that teenagers should be getting on a daily basis. And that number, which is I was a little surprised by, that ideal number of hours of sleep are 9.25 hours. Every teenager should be sleeping about 9.2 hours per day. However, according to some research and according to this Journal of Adolescent Health, only 8% of high school students are getting the recommended amount of sleep per day. 8%. That is an incredibly low number of kids that are getting enough rest. 23% of kids get only about 6 hours of sleep on average per school night, and only 10% get about 5 hours. That is huge, parents, because sleep is absolutely connected to our emotion. Now, there's all these different reasons why sleep affects our mood and why it's interrupted. There is certainly reasons, biological reasons. There are environmental reasons. There's all these different reasons why kids are not getting enough sleep. One of the big ones, though, is screen time. And by the way, parents, I included an article as part of this presentation that I highly recommend that you all read. And it is on, the power of sleep and the impact of sleep and the effect, but also how you can help your kids to improve their sleep. One of the really interesting bits of information that I got from this article, it was talking about this glow, right, that screens emit. So when you're looking at at a TV screen or at a computer screen or a tablet, there is a certain glow that is emitted, this blue light that is emitted that has this certain frequency. When it hits receptors in the eye, the receptors send a signal to the brain that suppresses the production of melatonin. Melatonin is what helps kids to go to sleep. It's like a sleep chemical that your body is supposed to produce by itself. But because of this blue light that is emitted by screens, it tricks the brain into suppressing the production of melatonin. It's one of the big reasons why kids don't get enough sleep. It's because they're not tired, because its brain is not releasing the melatonin that it was supposed to release. So it affects their ability to think, to process information, to regulate their emotions. It's also been connected. And again, when kids are not getting enough rest, they're sleepy, their emotions are dysregulated, depression levels go up, and substance abuse goes up, and also risky behaviors. So we need to take a stand, parents. We need to take a stand with our kids. We need to encourage consistency. We need to limit their screen time as much as possible, or disrupt that screen time, by the way, with activities, with physical activity, going outside, playing with the dog, doing things to get them away from that screen, right? That is tricking their brain into thinking that they don't need melatonin. You can boost the biological clock of a child that produces melatonin, by the way, by even implementing certain vitamins, melatonin vitamins, over the counter. These are not prescribed. These are all very important. One last tip, parents, to improve sleep for kids is when they're doing their schoolwork, please separate their schoolwork from their bedroom. My kids, for example, in the first couple of weeks of quarantine, wanted to be in bed and doing their homework. Now, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that, but psychologically, what the brain is doing is that it's associating homework with that bed, meaning that when it comes to bedtime, now they can't turn off, right? They can't turn off that part of the brain, and their brain is not producing melatonin. So we have to disconnect the bed from the homework because it doesn't really allow them to transition into sleep. So separate the two as much as possible, meaning try to create a different corner in the house where they do their homework, and try to not let them do their homework on their bed as much as possible. It really helps. Limit their consumption of news is another big tip to supporting our kids. Keep kids in the loop, but keep it very simple, especially for younger kids. There's no reason to give them a lot of details. Little kids especially, I'm talking about kindergarten, first graders, second graders. They don't need to know too much detail, right? Kids, especially if they're being exposed to the news, and I would highly encourage you to limit that for the little kids, especially with news about this epidemic that we're dealing with. But keep them in the loop, but don't give them too much. And they don't need to hear and see a lot of details on the news. It just leads to a lot of worry and a lot of unknown. And again, that sparks and it creates a lot of anxiety. Now, acknowledge their grief. This is a really important one. This is one that I held off on giving you too much detail about. But grief is such a typical reaction for kids right now, parents. I've been getting this from my mental health program. I've been getting this from administrators. I've been getting a lot of reports from different people stating that a lot of our kids are going through a lot of grief. And again, it has everything to do with this the loss of not having normal or end of year activities, the loss of not being able to participate in certain sports events, proms, theater productions, graduations, high school graduations, college there's so many things that young people do not get to participate in. And these are all losses, right? It may not seem like a loss to us as adults, but they are losses to kids, right? And like any loss, right, there are certain stages to grief. There is a certain level of disbelief. There's a certain level of negotiation, of anger, of resentment, depression. There's all these stages of grief. And research is showing that in this quarantine, kids are going through some of those similar stages, as if they had actually lost a physical person in their life. So we just need to acknowledge that, parents, because if we're not validating that grief, it lends to a child feeling like their feelings don't matter. And then it just leads to, or it just exacerbates their feeling of anger, of resentment. And sometimes that's where the friction is, right? Is kids feeling like, man, my parents don't understand me, not speaking my language, or they don't see my losses. They don't know where I'm coming from. And I think that as adults, sometimes we just want to dismiss because we don't, it's how we cope, right? We don't want our kids to be fixated on the things that they don't get to do right now. And sometimes the normal response is, hey, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. But I encourage you, otherwise, parents, I encourage just to listen to your kids. We don't have to feed into it. I'm just saying that we should listen to them. We should hear them out and just consider their grief and just validate it. You don't have to fix it because there's really nothing you can do to fix the losses that they've experienced. But just acknowledging goes a long ways, and validation goes a long ways to helping kids deal with their grief. If we can go to the next slide. Scheduling breaks from each other is something that I have found to be very necessary and important, parents, from our kids. It's okay. Again, I want to take you back to the reality that none of us can be perfect parents right now. It's so important that in this time of quarantine, and again, with all of this time that we get to spend together, we got to have a little break. I mean, my gosh, healthy marriages have implemented breaks. I think one of the, as a clinical therapist, when as I report on and as I do my own research on healthy relationships and healthy marriages, one of the key ingredients is just having breaks from each other, and having that time apart. And I would say in relationships in general, right? Healthy relationships are going to have a healthy level of distance from each other, right? To regroup, to just kind of have your own thoughts, to kind of get your mind stable and your emotions stable. We need that break. We need that little distance, healthy distance every now and then. So I want to encourage you to do that, and I don't want you to feel guilty for doing that, parents. So getting some fresh air, getting some sun, vitamin D is very important. Maybe you can't, all of a sudden just go on a walk and leave your kids because maybe they're too young, but put a movie on for them, right? Let them watch a movie. Let them watch, their favorite cartoon or movie or something. Play table games with them. Let them listen to their favorite music, or you listen to your favorite music. But encourage that distance. Encourage that healthy, that healthy distance for just a few minutes, because we all need it. Playing with pets, breathing exercises, meditation. These are all little things that can help us to take those breaks from each other. Last but not least, parents, one of the things that has become very real to me in the last several days, in the last couple of weeks, is that, believe it or not, our kids are not socializing with each other very much. I'm learning that while my daughters, for example, I have 2 younger boys and I have 2 older daughters, a 15 and a 12-year-old. And what I'm learning through them, and I know that this is the case also for many of my clients in my program, of our kiddos in our program, is that texting doesn't necessarily count as socializing. And that seems to be what kids are doing right now, what kids and young people are doing. They're texting each other here and there, but they're in this kind of like funky stage where they're not really socializing. And whereas in the past, they had all these opportunities to socialize, and we wouldn't be encouraging our kids to be FaceTiming each other all the time, or maybe some of us have even had to limit that in the past. This is such an important time to get our kids, or to challenge them to socialize, especially the little ones. They need contact. They need to connect with other kids. One of the big consequences, parents, that I see happening because of this quarantine is that we're going to be starting the next school year possibly with a lot of separation anxiety. Separation anxiety is a phenomenon where a kid has developed such a strong need to be next to their mother or father figure, and they have a really difficult time disconnecting. Separation anxiety is going to be rampant next school year at the beginning if we don't have those healthy boundaries with our kids, and if we're not allowing them to socialize some way, somehow with other kids. But get creative, right? Allow them to socialize virtually as much as possible. Let them connect with their cousins, let them connect with their kids. We have to force our kids to socialize so that they don't get into this isolation comfort zone, is what I like to call it. And that's not a good place for kids to be, right? It's going to create a lot of anxiety, and there's going to be a lot of moms that are going to be struggling to get their kids to their first day of school next year if we don't start thinking ahead, if we don't slowly start to expose our kids to socializing with other kids little by little. As much as possible. I mean, this would be a luxury, but in the next few weeks, maybe in the next month or so, as they start to lax social distancing a little bit, it would be important for kids to spend some time with grandma, or to spend some time with a family member that you trust, that they feel safe with. It is important to have that little bit of disconnect, parents. It's normal, it's healthy, and I really want you to be mindful of that, so that you don't find yourself struggling with social anxiety, separation anxiety, at the beginning of next year. And then last but not least, parents, my final message, just to conclude, is there's a lot of bright sides. You know, there is a silver lining to all of this. I don't want to, I didn't want to be completely negative, or just to spell all this anxiety or stress for you, this presentation. I have to say that, I'm very grateful for this time. I have to look at the good with the bad, and a lot of the good that I see with this situation right now is that I get to bond with my little boys more than I have ever bonded with them before. I feel like I'm getting to know them in a way that I didn't know them before, moms and dads. And that hurts me to say that, even as a mental professional, but I realize, how much time can really help with bonding and connecting. And when I see people walking outside with their kids, with their teenagers, I happen to live in a neighborhood where people don't seem to come outside. And all of a sudden, you see people walking, and you see, grandmothers walking their grandchildren, and you see, their moms walking with their teenage kids who before didn't want anything to do with us, right? Because they're teenagers and they're too old for us, or for some reason. So look at the silver lining. There's a lot of positives. Don't dwell on the negative, parents. For every negative thing, there's always going to be 2 or 3 other positive things that we need to focus on. So be good to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. We're going to get through this together, and we're not alone. We're not alone, parents. We're going through some of the similar issues. We're going through some of the similar challenges. We're going to get through this together, and we have to believe that we're going to be better off at the end. So with that said, thank you all so much. Alejandra, I don't even know if I have time for questions at this point. I know I need to be respectful of time.
No, Mr. Castro, no, thank you. But your presentation was so thorough and so relevant. And I appreciate that you address parents as human beings and their role as parents separately. I believe that's a plus for us these days. And I would like to thank you. I would like to reassure parents that there will be an opportunity for them to reach out to us via email if necessary,
Yes.
because it's 4 o'clock and it's 4:04 actually. And I still would like to have an opportunity to give a quick overview of what Ms. Kingston has relayed to me in terms of the enrollment, registration, and transfer processes for 2021. Mr. Castro, as always, you shine through. Your passion and your commitment to serve our community is something that you can't hide, and we thank you for that, and we are in good hands with you.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. You can always count on me, and I'm always here for our parents.
I know that. Thank you so much. That's why I reach out to you. You're the expert, but you also have a heart. That's a great combination. Thank you very much, Mr. Castro. Thank you.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
And with that, parents, just bringing to your attention, part of the materials that I uploaded when I set up the event was the information that Mr. Castro was referring to. It's a parent's guide to teenagers sleep. So what I will do is, despite I uploading it already, I'm going to ask information and technology to also upload this reading alongside the recording for this meeting, so that you guys can refer to it and benefit. I was alarmed to hear the very low percentage, I believe it was 8%, that Mr. Castro said students who get adequate sleep and are in such an important development stage. So that's really good to know. I would like to then, if I may, just warn you that I'm going to be extremely brief, but this is information that you can refer to as you listen to our recording or as you visit our webpage. Just giving you enrollment information for the next school year. Visit our website. There's two ways to get in for the most information. When we think of transfers, it's a process that parents who would like their child to attend the school other than their home school have to fill out. And we have two different types of transfers: an intra-district, if you are a family within our serving boundaries, and an inter-district transfer if we are not your school district and you want your child attending with us. And so there was a time period for the application. It closed on March 2nd. For families who filled out their transfer requests by the deadline given initially, your letters with an answer will be mailed out to you in late May. And so there will be instructions in the letter as to what procedures you then follow, and I will refer to that in a moment. Also, for parents who still submitted a transfer request, but it was after the deadline of March 1st, March 2nd, those will not be processed until after July of 2020. Until that month, Student Services will be looking at those requests and will provide, of course, an answer via mail in a letter. An important notice is that due to our school closures, we have not accepted transfer requests since we have been closed. That there's a temporary hold on that, but we ask that you please visit our webpage again and go to the Student Services page for up-to-date information, because the opportunity to submit a transfer will reopen. We just don't have a date yet. We think of new enrollments. New enrollments are students who have not been enrolled with. They may be returning students or they may be new students altogether. New enrollments can be processed at the school sites, but only by appointment. So if you aren't aware what your home school is, you can go to our webpage and check the school site locator. You input your address and the system tells you what high school, what middle school, what elementary school is the one assigned to your address. After that, you go to our school site directory and you call them to make an enrollment appointment. Please leave your information, your name, your student's name, and a phone number where they can call you back. The school site, someone from the school site will contact you within 5 to 7 business days and schedule an enrollment appointment with you. Given that you will have to make an appointment and the process is time consuming because the schools are closed, we highly recommend that you look at the enrollment packet, download it, that you print it out, and you look at all the required documentation that is listed in the enrollment packet. If you come prepared, you will not have to go back or make another appointment to complete the enrollment. If you come unprepared, if all your forms are not filled out, or if you are lacking necessary documentation, that would mean that you have to make another appointment to then come back, which will delay the completion of the enrollment. So we want to make sure that you are aware of this rule. And also, of course, we have enrollment packets available at our school sites, but if you are able to download it and print it out, it would facilitate the process versus you coming to the school, picking one up, filling it out, figuring out what you need. I think it would be more time consuming if you did it that way. But if you must, of course, you are welcome to our packets. When you arrive at our school sites for your enrollment appointment, please know that we are adhering ourselves to the social and physical distancing rules. And you have to be wearing a face covering when you come to our school sites. And that is not only to protect you, but also to protect our staff. I think this is a symbiotic relationship these days. We all should behave in a manner that protects others, but also that protects that is protecting us as well. And when we protect us and when we protect others, we are protecting everyone. The degree to which this virus has been transmitted is a perfect example of this invisible um, elements that can really hurt us. So it's moment. It's a very particular moment to be cautious and to be exercising that consistent level of caution and respect for one another. Uh, uh, on the screen, you see that the enrollment appointments will be issued between 8:30 and 11:30. And we have on the screen, I will be sliding through the different site assignments, the days of the week when those schools will be open. And those are posted or will be posted on our webpage, but also on the recording, you will be able to refer back and figure out on what day of the week you will be issued an appointment, depending on what school you are enrolling your students at. So as you can see, every day of the week, we have school sites that will be open. They're at your service, there to help you, but definitely abiding by all the rules of protection that we need to exercise to maintain our health as a community. If you still have an enrollment question, please call your school site, leave a detailed message. Again, if you go to our webpage, CJUSD.net, you can go to the school directory and look at the phone number for the school. You can leave your name. Be specific as to why you're calling. What is it that you need? Leave your student's name and leave a callback number. And the school site will call you back as soon as they are able to. Please be mindful that schools are not open, but once a week. And they are doing their best to serve all their families. So please visit our website. Another reminder that I think I've been telling you about this all along. Email is a good friend these days. It's always a good friend, but email is a beautiful tool these days to reach out to us. And the the pattern for our our email addresses is first name underscore last name at cjusd.net. And when in doubt, you can reach out to us. Please remain optimistic. When we are optimistic, we can feel better. I loved Mr. Castro's recommendations to get exercise, to get sunshine. When he said that I looked out my window, I haven't been able to get sunshine. That's the case for almost every day, but it's definitely a good reminder that we need to take care of ourselves. We are here to serve you, parents, at your service always. Reach out to us. If you are uncertain as to who do you need to contact, depending on your need, please, you see on the screen our email addresses. It's Mr. Diaz, who is our Director of Language Support Services. My email, Alejandra_de la Torre at causd.net. And if you use the simplest form of email here is lss at cjusd.net. If you email us at LSS, then Mr. Diaz and our administrative assistants, Mrs. Guerra, and I received that email, the three of us. So one of us will get back to you and we'll be very happy to assist you. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen to then adjourning the meeting. Let me see. Mr. Diaz, any feedback?
Ale, thank you so much. I want to thank Mr. Castro again for his great presentation. We've been monitoring the chat or the question and answer on the site. And Mr. Antonio Castro, if you're still on the call, which I believe you might still be, I've got a couple families asking, how do they reach out to your office? Is there a particular email that you can provide, or can we put that?
Absolutely. Thank you. No, absolutely. And I'm sorry because I just realized that I didn't put my email address on the presentation. It'll be my first name underscore last name. So Antonio underscore Castro at CJUSD.net.
Great, Mr. Castro. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure we put something underneath the link to the video that we're going to put on our website. We'll put something there to link the email addresses as well.
Perfect. Thank you. No problem.
Right. Ali, I believe we have a couple questions from a couple parents. They've flagged it in the Q&A. So if you would like to unmute a Diana Sanchez, I believe she might have a question.
Okay, let me see.
I believe she's unmuted actually.
Oh, yes, she is unmuted. Diana, good evening, and thank you for your patience and your interest. Your microphone is open. I don't hear anything.
I don't either, Ali. She may not have the ability.
Mr. Sanchez. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
we can always come back. There is Maria Zuniga, who also may have a question, I believe.
Maria Zuniga, good afternoon, good evening, I almost want to say. Thank you for joining us and for your patience. Your microphone is open. Do you have a question for us? Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon. I have a question. My son is in 7th grade, currently attending Terrace Hills Middle School. My concern is he's on an inter-district transfer. He's coming from San Bernardino. I don't have to reapply for him for the 2020-2021 school year, correct? He should be covered?
Great news. Yes, great news, Mrs. Zuniga. If he's going from 7th to 8th grade and there are no concerns with his behavior, with his attendance, he should be able to be just transferred over to the 8th grade registration load. And the school site should be contacting you with specific directions and procedures for registration, which is basically renewing the emergency card and all those things. But if he's going from 7th to 8th and you want the same school site, your inter-district transfer should remain valid for the school year. If next year you want him to continue to attend our schools, you will, however, need to fill out another inter-district transfer because he's moving from one level to another, from middle school to high school. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I appreciate it. I just wasn't sure with everything that's going on, whether I would have to reapply for him or not. So that really eases my concerns. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad. We're here for you, and it's great to have you here. Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you so
Zuniga.
much. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Safe.
Thank you.
You as well.
You
Thank
too.
you. Anyone else?
So, Ale, a gal named Claudia Thiessen, I believe, just flagged a question possibly.
Claudia, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I was just wondering
Hi.
if, hi, thank you for having this meeting. This has been really helpful. I just wanted to know if I need to register my daughter for middle school since she's already part of the district, but I'm not sure if there's any paperwork I need to fill out.
Okay. Thank you, Claudia, for your question. You know what? Because I rushed myself, I didn't make that indication, so I'm glad you're bringing this up. If students are continuing with us from any grade level to another, and we are your home district, and there are no transfers involved, your student will be moved over to the next grade level by our information and technology department. If they're in 3rd grade, we will move them over to 4th grade and so on. If there is a change in grade level, you from 6th grade to 7th or from 8th to 9th, and you want them to attend their home school, and we are your school district, same rule applies. IT will transfer them over to the next grade level, and that school will be contacting you with specific directions related to registration procedures. For students moving from elementary to middle or from middle to high school, it will involve not only the renewal of the emergency card, but also their PE clothes and other related procedures that need to be taken care of. But as of today, we don't have that information yet. I am certain that the school sites, our site principals, are working hard to make sure that everything is in place for our 2020-2021 school year. Does that answer your question, Claudia?
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much for that
Wonderful. Our pleasure. Thank you.
information. Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Any other questions?
Ale, I think that Neda and I answered most of them, at least on the chat as well.
Okay.
There is one, I'm just going to ask, there's a gal named Norma on the line that had a question. I'm not seeing it on the Q&A, so you might want to unmute her mic in case she does have a question.
Norma, hello, your microphone is open. Thank you for your patience in your
No,
time.
thank you so much. I just wanted to thank you and thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. And that was it. Thank you so much.
Oh, how sweet. It makes our day. Thank you, Norma.
No,
Thank you.
It does
The big-
help me so much.
I'm so glad. The best compliment we get as employees of the school district is the attention of our parents. It is positive feedback, and it is the opportunity to serve you and to be able to address any questions that you have and any needs. So thank you very much. You're very kind and generous.
She does.
Okay, I think that answers most, if not all, the questions. So, parents that are still online, thank you so much for participating with us today. We hope these sessions have been valuable and informative. So again, please continue being safe. We're wishing you the best. We truly, truly miss our students and seeing their smiling faces in our schools. And we hope to see them in the very near future. So we will continue being in touch. But other than that, I wish you all a great evening. Ale.
Thank you. Just reiterate our gratitude and reiterate that we are here for you and for your children. We understand at a very basic level that you are the foundation, you are the source of safety and reassurance that our students need. You are the main source of peace, of hope, of optimism. And it's important for us that you have the tools, the tips, the resources to make sure that you are well, because if you are well, then our children are well also. We will stay in touch for future opportunities. And we thank you. Reach out to us if you need, lss@cjusd.net with any questions we didn't get to. Apologies for that. Our meeting took longer than expected, but I believe the topic was so relevant and so beautifully delivered by Mr. Castro that we were glued to the screen, and we certainly found much value to that. Even those of us who don't have little ones were in awe of his passion. It comes through, and we are again together in this moment, and we will be in touch. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all. And thank you, Mr. Orloff. And thank you, Mr. Castro, again for joining us. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you again.